when I saw some of the stuff you sent us, I was like, wow. Now, this is stuff that I feel like I could really actually sink my teeth into. This felt like very digestible data, and very, very, usable stuff that is easy to understand and explain. So, we've had you on for 40 minutes. We've been firing a lot of questions at you. I do want to give it the next 10 or 15 minutes to really talk about the NHL Edge project and like the tilt stuff you were showing and talking about. Like, I just basically want to give you the floor to talk about it, and then we'll probably fire some questions your way. But it really is fascinating, and I think that is stuff people will really enjoy here.
Yeah, sure. I mean, let's start with ice tilt then, because you mentioned it, and it's probably quicker to get through than opportunity analysis, which is just a fire hose. NHL Edge is our tracking data. NHL Edge IQ is something that is a series of projects that we build out with Amazon Web Services, AWS. They're our partner on these projects. And one of the things, if you've seen Faceoff probability during games that pops up on the score bug, that was the second project we did with them, which is remarkable when someone gets thrown out of a draw and you see them change on the fly in front of you. That's all the tracking data and the processing and the machine learning model behind the scenes that's being put out in sub-second latency. It's fast. It's amazing to see it. But with ice tilt, like if we looked at the game from last night, well, let's say I'll explain it for us first before you throw that up. But you mentioned zone time before. I don't like zone time. I think zone time is fine. I think zone time is something we did because it was easy to have anybody say upstairs, when's the puck on this side of the blue line or on this side of the other blue line. But every time a defenseman, if you're a team that stretches the play out a bit in the neutral zone and hangs on to it, makes some DDD passes, trying to find some offense with some speed, you're getting dinged as a demerit every time you do that.
Right.
And that's exactly the same thing in the data world to when a puck gets dumped in and there's a line change and there's only one forechecker. It's also the same as when you get hemmed around your own net for 15 seconds and all 10 skaters are below the tops of the circles. It's not detailed enough. It certainly doesn't measure anything to do with momentum. You're talking about one moment in time. And the key thing on any sort of an offensive zone presence is how much more time that leads to. You can be one and done on the rush, but if you don't recover the puck's out of the zone, now you're going back the other way. You're not really doing a good job of creating any sort of momentum in the game. So I got to present this ice tilt idea to Jack Hughes. Go back to when I said I work with Jim Hughes.
Yeah.
VHS. Now I'm explaining a machine learning model to Jack Hughes at the All-Star game. His son, who at that point, one of the Hughes boys wasn't born yet. So anyway, that's how old I am and how much stuff I've been around in my career. But I asked him what it feels like when your team is gaining momentum in a game. And he mentioned something to the effect of, when we're jumping over the boards, multiple shifts in a row, and we're keeping the puck in the offensive zone, and we're really just hemming them in, and they can't get up ice with it enough, we really feel like we're tilting the ice against them. And I smiled and I laughed because I had not told him what the project was called. And I'm like, that's great because we're calling it ice tilt. And he said, you're calling it ice tilt? I said, we're calling it ice tilt. And he's like, that's amazing. And it's true. We've heard this phrase for years on broadcasts.
Yeah,
and it's
tilted.
And it's a feeling, right? I didn't play at a high level, but I know what it's like, mostly playing D. You can't, it's the worst feeling in the world. And it feels like you are trying to push a puck uphill and it just keeps coming back at you. So ice tilt measures the location of all the players on the ice. That's the play location. Ice tilt is calculated when you look at that and the preceding 119 seconds. So for the last 2 minutes, what has the average play location been? We're not looking at the puck. If you stick a pin in the middle of all the players, that's what's going to give you the play location. And you take that out over the previous 2 minutes. So now it's not only a tactical or a territorial stat, it's also momentum based. Because if you really want to generate a good amount of ice tilt, you have to have that multiple shift effect like we talked about.
Well, that's where the saying comes from.
So you created this ice tilt model and now you give it to every team? Or how does that work?
Teams have access to it. Broadcasters have access to it. Yeah. And it's appeared a lot on NHL Network's done some great stuff with it. It's been very highly featured on our data casts with Turner. which is kind of cool. That was I was on the headset for that Western Conference Finals last year with the talent, and I got to sit in the TV booth, TV control room, something I've never done before. And along with watching, I still think the current shift duration at the bottom of the screen, knowing who's got the fresh legs, knowing like the puck's about to leave the offensive zone. This player's been out for 40 seconds. This could go south really quick. And that was one of the things they had me do is they're like, hey, if you see that coming, give us a heads up. And I would chirp in their ear and say, hey, 40 seconds, puck's leaving the zone. This guy's going to get stuck in his zone if it's sure enough. But like being able to have that backed up by the ice tilt and say, remember when that guy didn't get off the ice? Look at the growth in ice tilt now because of it. And we do have the one graph from the Jersey game we can put up to show it. So what you're looking at here from left to right is the game itself, right? The first section is the first period. The middle section is the second. Last period is the third. And you can see the time spent with tilt, meaning when the play was on the other side of the red line for your team. So in the Devils case, they had the play, on the old habits die hard, on the offensive side of the ice, 34 minutes of the game. But what's really interesting is when you go in and look at, you can see when this line moves north, it's heading towards the Bruins defensive zone. And when it's heading south here towards the bottom of the screen, it's heading towards the Devils defensive zone. You can see the different colors on the line. Those represent power plays. So you're able to see how effective power plays are, right? So the Devils got a power play in the first period there, but they had already tilted the ice significantly. It's not going to jump up a lot more, but you can see in there were probably at least half or partial clears a couple times on that first power play by the Devils in the first period. And then the lines I dropped in over the top show where the goals are. So while this game was a 5-1 game, the first period was really back and forth. Second period opened up a bit more, right? I mean, and then the third period, you can see it's the Bruins actually did a decent job of hanging tough for most of it, I think. Just looking at it again, I was not able to watch this game live, but it's interesting for me. If I now as a coach, if I'm going to use this, I'm going to go in and look at that moment right next to the Devils logo where the game shifted. So Bruins had a power play, that yellow streak there to the left of the screen. Then it goes down, and then there's a hard pivot. I want to go in and watch that moment and see what happened at that point in time because it led to a Devils power play.
Wow.
Right. And then you go into the second period and you look at the end of the Bruins power play. Again, huge spike in ice tilt right there. What happens in those swings?
What a great way for a coach to be able to look at this graph and then revisit points of the game. We all see coaches on the bench, with their pens generally, and I know every coach is a little bit different. They're just putting little time. A lot of times, just okay, 10:54 turnover, and the number of the player or goal, whatever. So they're like doing it by hand. With that graph, you don't really have to sit there and necessarily take notes on your notepad anymore for a coach or on your lineup card because that graph is giving me an idea of what all the big events are in a game. So, I mean, that is awesome.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.